Most recent discussions on national security have centered on three topics: the remarkable third term for the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, who's close to 80 years of age. In fact, this will make him the longest serving National Security Advisor to the country. The appointment of the additional NSA, Rajendra Khanna, who earlier headed the Research and Analysis Wing, has also made news because this also is an indication of the line of succession in the NSA. Because so far we had the NSA and the deputy NSAs, and the senior most amongst them uh, sort of headed the NSCS Secretariat, which is the agency or the body which performs the secretariat service for the National Security Advisor. And the third important element has been the salience of three ex mandarins: Mr. Doval himself, who's from the 68th batch of the Indian Police Service; Mr. P.K. Mishra, who's the principal secretary to the Prime Minister, also with the rank of a cabinet minister, who's from the 1972 batch of the IAS; and of course, the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, who's from the 78th batch of the Indian Foreign Service. And thus, we have three very senior people from three of the topmost civil services of the country occupying positions which are very, very important in the governance architecture and in the security strategic environment for the country. Now, of these three, Mr. Mishra is very reticent. We hardly see him in public. He does not address press conferences. He does not accept invites to valedictory functions, and is generally very quiet. But both Mr. Doval and Mr. Jaishankar have been expounding their thoughts on various occasions. For example, Mr. Doval was the chief guest at the Dikshant Samaroh, or the passing out parade of the Indian Police Service officers at the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy recently. And there he gave out his doctrine on how the citizens need to be informed, because the challenge to India is not only from China and Pakistan, but can also appear from other sources. Then we have Mr. Jaishankar, who's a very good speaker, very prolific writer, and we've just seen his book, Why Bharat Matters. But is the are the speeches of Mr. Doval, are the speeches and pronouncements of Mr. Jaishankar, are they national security doctrine? Or is the national security doctrine something more than that? Is it something less than that? Does India have a national security doctrine? We do have a rough idea of what the national security doctrine is. And in fact, the previous CDS had gone on record saying that just because we don't have a written security doctrine does not mean that we don't have a policy in place. But friends, let's put things on record. Last October, November, the National Security Council Secretariat, which is housed in the Sardar Patel Bhavan, and in fact, a lot of news items appeared last year that all the other officers have been ousted from Sardar Patel Bhavan, and these included the officers of the DAAPRG, that is the Department of Administrative Reforms, Personal and Grievances. There was the Ministry of Panchayats. There was the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. There was also the camp office of the National Center for Good Governance. Now, all these offices have been asked to move out, and Sardar Patel Bhavan is the center from where the NSCS operates, and it is on the Parliament Street. Therefore, it is perhaps in the fitness of things that this secretariat should produce a report which should be debated and discussed in the Parliament, like the security doctrines of several other countries, including, for example, USA, UK, France, Germany, China, and even Pakistan. They have a national security doctrine. Now, a national security doctrine is also a statement of a country to itself. It's also a statement of the country to all its constituent units, to its political parties, to state governments, to academia, to think tanks, so that it's very clear that what is it that the national security of a country constitutes. And it's therefore very important. Let me take you to the national security doctrines of three countries, and the three countries which are quite relevant to us, and they are the US of A, that is the USA. We have and I'll be sharing with you some extracts from the security doctrine of China and also of Pakistan, and then we'll try to see whether India needs to formulate a security doctrine for itself. Let's start with the USA, because the whole concept of NSA and the whole concept of having a public document very clearly defining what are the security imperatives for that country, came from the USA. And let me quote from their published statement. It says, although the international environment has become more contested, the United States remains the world's leading power. Our economy, our population, our innovation, and our military strength continue to grow, often outpacing those of other large countries. Our inherent national strengths, the ingenuity, creativity, resilience, and determination of the American people, our values, our diversity, our democratic institutions, our leadership in technology, and economic dynamism of our diplomatic corps, our development professionals, our intelligence community, and our military remain unparalleled. We are experienced in using and applying our power in combination with our allies and partners. Now, this is very important, that we use our power in alliance with our partners, and and this significantly adds to our strength. And it goes on to say, we've learned lessons from our failures and also from our successes. The idea that we should compete with major autocratic powers to shape the international order enjoys broad support that is partisan at home and is deepening abroad. So that is the very important point, that this doctrine has bipartisan support, that whether it is the Republican regime or the Democratic regime, yes, there will be some tweaking of the national security doctrine. Operational details will, of course, vary, and they're not expected to be in the public domain. But the fact is that America projects itself as a democracy against the two autocratic regimes of Russia and China. Now, I have not included North Korea because that is a satellite of these two large autocratic, I mean, in the US perception, autocratic regimes. Now, in direct contrast to what the US security doctrine is, we have the Chinese policy on the subject, again, which has been published, and they call it the Comprehensive National Security Policy, in which the Communist Party of China says that we are going to create a rich country with a strong army. So that's an opening proposition. The CPC will create a rich country with a strong army, and in their perception, the comprehensive national security has 11 components, which includes political security, which in other words means the hegemony of the Communist Party of China, territorial security, military security, economic security, cultural security, social security, scientific technological security, information security, ecological security, resource security, and nuclear security. So, if you notice, all of these are sort of intertwined. And of course, when we talk about the way they are moving into whether it is the CPEC or whether their investments in various other countries are concerned, it is very clear that China wants to see itself as the major power in the world, and that the whole world should circumscribe around China. That is their philosophy. And of course, it says very clearly that the CPC will continue to hold and exercise power with all organs of governance: the army, the public sector, the judiciary, the press, the provinces, the investors, and all of them will be subordinate to the diktats and directions of the CPC. After China, we'll go to a close neighbor, a friend of China, that is Pakistan. And Pakistan's internal security paper also makes for very interesting reading, because one of the things that comes out is its obsession with India, because it's got 4 lines on Iran, it's got 6 for Afghanistan, it's got 10 for China, and it has no less than 14 lines to describe its relationship, its tension, and its entire its entire frustration, I would say, with India and with the growth of India. Fortunately, now Pakistan has started using the word Indian Ocean to describe the Hind Mahasagar, because earlier It was toying with the idea of calling it the Muslim Ocean, calling it the Asian Ocean. It tried many things, but finally it has accepted that Indian Ocean is the name. And I've had a column in ThePrint on this subject, so you might like to look that up as well. But you know, the Pakistan report models itself. It says that Pakistan is an Islamic state and wants to model itself on Riyasat-e-Madina, something which had been set up about 14 centuries ago. So, in a way, its forward vision also takes it back about 14 centuries. And then, of course, it also talks about Pakistan being a multilingual, multi-ethnic, country with horizontal inequalities and vertical inequalities. And many of the lines seem to be a straight copy paste from the World Bank formulations on gender, on disparity, on inclusive growth, rural development. So all this it makes for very interesting reading. But the fact is that that it talks about its fantastic relations with China. It talks about opening up the links to Central Asia. It sort of wants to project itself as a connect between West Asia and Central Asia. And mind you, in Pakistan's formulation, Gilgit, Baltistan, and the POJK, that is the Jammu Kashmir under the occupation of Pakistan, are not treated as provinces of Pakistan. They are treated separately. And in fact, Pakistan only lists its provinces as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Baluchistan, Sindh, Pakistan, and the capital territory of Islamabad. Now, this is in direct contrast to how we look at Jammu and Kashmir, how we've always looked at Jammu Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir and now Ladakh as a union territory are an integral part of the Indian Union. Bharat, India, India that is Bharat, Bharat that is India, interchangeably. And the Schedule 1, Article 1 very clearly lists that this is the territory of India and this is the territory that we have to protect. This is the territory that we have to that we have defined very clearly in our constitution. And therefore, it's perhaps important that we should also step up the work on our national security doctrine, because it will have 5 very clear benefits. And I list these benefits. The first is that it will compel the government to take a comprehensive assessment, a comprehensive review of the security and the diplomatic and all the elements that we have, which make which define the sovereign elements of a country. In other words, our national security doctrine has to look at our relations with China, with Pakistan, with Russia, with USSR, Russia, G20, and all these countries in a holistic manner. So our relationship cannot be episodic. It cannot be periodic. It cannot be driven by incidents. It must be based on what we think our attitude, what we think our strategic interest would be. So defining it would in fact be very, very, very important for us. And we also begin to realize that it is not just the contest with the borders that we have, because whether it is the CPEC, the LAC, and the LOC, they are of course areas of concern, but we have to be concerned also about the gray zone activities which China is doing in all our neighbors, with which we've had historical ties. We've had greater historic and cultural ties with Nepal, with Bangladesh, with Myanmar, with Maldives, with Sri Lanka. But China is making its presence felt there, and that is not in terms of contested borders. It's in terms of technologies, it's in terms of investments. So that is something that we have to be very careful about. And secondly, we also have to send a signal to our own universities, to our own think tanks, to our own press, to our own media, that look, the Chinese dragon is trying to embrace a lot of institutions. We have to be careful. That's something that needs to be clearly spelled out. The third thing that needs to be spelled out is that threats or the challenges do not come only from states. Challenges also come from non-state actors. So that's also something which a national security doctrine can very clearly identify and very clearly state that, look, the challenge to India, the challenge to the sovereignty of India and Bharat is not just from states, it can also come from non-state actors. And these non-state actors could be located anywhere in the world. Fourth, a national security doctrine will also help us to be very clear and to declare to the world that what is it that we are willing to do for the world. For instance, what is going to be our commitment to Quad? What is the extent to which we shall ensure that the sea lanes of communication would be open? What extent are we going to put our naval armadas in the blue waters? So all these are things that we know very clearly. We'll also be able to communicate to the world at large that this is what India stands for. And remember that India is already amongst the top five economic powers, heading towards being the third largest economic power. And in 2047, we shall be in a pole position. So articulating and making our position very clear is very important. And last but not the least is the fact that a national security doctrine must have inputs from all state governments. It must have inputs from political parties. It must open itself to discussion. And when you have an informed citizenry, it is also responsible. It is also the responsibility of every citizen to contribute to the national security, and therefore having a national security doctrine is very important. And we do hope that the exercise which the NCS, which the National Security Council Secretariat had started last year in the month of October, November, is completed at the very earliest. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure researching this subject and sharing it with you. Thank you.